1,000 tweets you delete right before a hearing. Usually that's not good news. She's near a tandem, a bit of an angry tweeter.
Yeah, she said it embarrassed her now, and so she deleted them. Welcome, everybody. It is a very busy Tuesday, February 23rd of 2021, and welcome to Hour 1 for this Tuesday of Fox and Friends, Ainsley.
Good morning to you. Thank you so much for choosing us every single morning. We really appreciate that.
We do.
All right, let's talk about the COVID relief bill, $1.9 trillion. The House Budget Committee approved this bill, so now it goes to the House, and Chuck Schumer says they're going to pass it in the Senate. They're going to send it to Joe Biden's desk by the 14th of March.
You sound so positive.
But you know what's interesting? We're hearing this. Reportedly, we're hearing that $138 billion is still left over from other COVID relief packages that hasn't even been spent yet. But they're asking you to work harder, to spend your tax dollars, to pay for a lot of things that you probably don't even know are in this bill. Yeah. Look at this, Brian.
Yeah, I mean, look at the numbers and you see the categories. And we went over this yesterday, but now that we're going to see the votes coming through the House and Senate, you really got to say to yourself, do you want to put $1.5 million for the Seawall International Bridge from New York to Canada? Do you want to put $30 billion for public transit?
Nope.
Do you want to help dig a subway for Nancy Pelosi?
Nope.
Do you want $500 million for arts and humanitarian museums? Do you want to help fund Native American preservation of their language? These are good things. Has nothing to do
and the minimum
with
wage.
Emergency relief. Don't tell me it's an emergency and say I got to preserve ancient languages. Yeah. Why can't you just keep it to this, then turn around and say I want infrastructure? There might be bipartisan proposals, but when you try to jam it through and only about a third has to do with COVID relief, when you have a ton of great news, like a decrease in cases, 70% since September, a decrease in hospitalizations over 50%, and deaths around the same number, when things are going down and vaccines are going up, you can't say that if you need an emergency passage. But to Joe Biden's credit, he did ask us a question.
We need Congress to pass my American Rescue Plan. It deals with the immediate crisis facing our small businesses. Now, critics say the plan is too big. Let me ask them a rhetorical question. What would you have me cut? What would you leave out? The American Rescue Plan targets $50 billion. To support the hardest hit small businesses after this program expires at the end of March. Would you not help invest in them? Would you let them continue to go under?
So what would you have me cut? And take a look. You guys mentioned this list a little while ago, and there it goes. You know, when you think about $1.9 trillion, that is so much money. But if you notice, this is not referred to as a COVID rescue plan. It's called an American Rescue Plan. So the Democrats are trying to rescue their constituencies all across America, and not just for this year, but for years in the future. When you look at it, and the Wall Street Journal did a real good job looking at stuff that is related to COVID, they say that about $825 billion, which is a gigantic number, has some even charitable connection to COVID. But over $1 trillion simply does not.
So more is for COVID, right? Is that what you're saying?
More is for other stuff.
More is for other stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, not COVID.
Exactly. And that's why Kevin McCarthy said this to Sean Hannity last night.
Do you ever realize, does your vote matter? Exactly, you're seeing in this bill. Because the Democrats have taken over now, this is what happens. $100 million for a tunnel just outside of Nancy Pelosi's district. Millions of dollars for a bridge that Schumer wants. Not for a COVID bill. This isn't a transportation bill. And now that we're finding that they're putting more money in for education, but they've just passed $68 billion for education. They've only spent $4 of it. The money they're passing in this bill doesn't even come to fruition until another year going forward. It does nothing to help moving forward. It's what the Democrats always want to do, spend more money from hardworking taxpayers.
And so it's going to come out of the House. It's going to pass through the House. It's going to go over to the Senate. And there are going to be a bunch of Republicans, obviously, and Democrats even, that are going to scrutinize it. But given the fact that the CBO, the Congressional Budget Office, which is supposed to be nonpartisan, said that the economic recovery in the country is already underway and will be back to pre-pandemic levels in a month or two, it's going to be a tough sell. And then one of the hardest things is that $15 per hour minimum wage. Joe Manchin has said he's not on board with that. So now, apparently, the Democrats are talking about reducing it to either $11 or $12 an hour. And Joe Manchin says $11 is about the right place to be, Ainsley.
Kristen Sinema, Democrat from Arizona, she has suggested that she might not support that $15 an hour as well. All right, so here in the state of New York, so many people, you've heard Janice Dean, our own Janice Dean, who lost her in-laws during the COVID cover-up scandal. They were both in nursing homes, and so many people, gosh, we have so many stories of people that we've interviewed that have lost their loved
500,000 people
ones.
have died
Exactly. So it's become a huge scandal here in New York, and everyone across the country is talking about it. Ron Kim, who's a Democrat, lost his uncle. He's an assemblyman here in New York. Now he's calling for Cuomo to be impeached. But Cuomo, when he was asked about it, he says he's under investigation because Trump attacked him first. Listen to this.
We have had requests from the Department of Justice since last year when President Trump accused Democratic states of the COVID problem. I then actually gave a speech at the Democratic Convention and attacked him for his COVID policy. He then publicly attacked me and called for an investigation of New York. Department of Justice then sent 4 states, Democratic states only, requests for information. That was back in August. So it's been ongoing since August.
And he's somebody in Governor Cuomo who's got still high approval ratings, although they dropped slightly. But again, when in doubt, blame Trump. The problem is no one's buying it. Donald Trump has left. This scrutiny is coming now. It happened with an indifference towards what the federal policy was. The CDC does not back it up. Seema Verma on this very station said there's nothing about the CDC that says send infected COVID patients back into nursing homes. So this is going to be something people are looking at. And the problem with Governor Cuomo, he's got such bad blood and he's treated people so poorly in the past. Do you know, it turns out, according to one of his aides, he has a do not yell list with very few people on it. Right. That was told to a state senator that she was on a do not yell list. So he's walking around being thuggish with other lawmakers, and now he's wondering why so few have his back. But they are not strong enough to stand up and pull back his emergency orders, his emergency powers. They'll gradually dissipate April 30th. And the way he's treated this state in locking the thing down, in shutting schools, in eliminating sports, and when you do open it up to such an indifference to the future of businessmen and women, I'm just wondering if he's ever going to get the lesson learned, because he is getting at least $50 billion from this $1.9 trillion. And the people that are getting less are the ones that actually kept their state open, like Florida and South Dakota.
Indeed. So, you know, Mr. Cuomo.
Banning of certain types of firearms.
The president is a strong supporter of gun control and has been an advocate all of his life, his professional life, on this question. The role of the Justice Department is to advance the policy program of the administration as long as it is consistent with the law. There is room under the law for the president's policies to be pursued, then I think the president is entitled to pursue them.
Attorney General nominee Judge Merrick Garland signaled that any gun control policies put forth by the Biden administration could be backed by the DOJ. In an effort to protect their rights, one county in Missouri is giving their sheriff the power to arrest any federal agent who attempts to enforce a policy that violates their local gun laws. Here with more is Newton County Commissioner David Osborne. Good morning to you, Commissioner.
Hey, good morning, Ainsley. How are you?
I'm doing well. So when you hear him, it's not what the Constitution says, it's what the Biden administration wants to enforce, and he is there to make sure that that is followed. What made you want to pass this ordinance?
Well, Ainsley, first off, thank you so much for having me on. It's a real privilege to be here. Huge fan of the show.
Thank you.
You know, and for us, it was very simple. We had people walking through our courthouse doors saying, what are you going to do to protect our rights? When I have a 70-year-old retired principal walk through my door with a letter saying I want to make my 37 acres a sanctuary for guns, it starts you thinking, hey, we need to do something about this. And I've got to give a shout out to James Cohagen in Camden County. He actually kicked this off with the first draft of this with an ordinance, and then constituents and friends of mine just started putting that in front of me every day to say, hey, we need to look at this and we need to do the same thing. So we did. And when we did, we took it before our prosecuting attorney here and had him look at it and review it, and we added some things. And of course, we took it to our sheriff too. That was a very important step for us to take it to our sheriff and say, Sheriff, what do you see in here that you like, don't like? We want to work with you, and we want to make sure that you're very comfortable, and we're considerate of how you're going to enforce this. So those are some of the steps that we took.
Okay, so Commissioner, your ordinance protects against any tax that's imposed on firearms, accessories, or ammunition, registering or tracking of firearms, registering or tracking of firearm owners, confiscation of firearms from law-abiding citizens. What do you fear? I mean, I think it's clear when I read that, but I want to ask you, what do you fear that the Biden administration will do and take away when it comes to your rights?
Well, I think our biggest concern would be this. Our biggest concern would be the taxes. Because he's made mention of it. He said it. He said as much. He had Mr. Beto come on and say, we're going to tax you very high on this, and we got to figure it out. But some people are looking at paying $40,000 and $50,000 and $60,000 worth of taxes to be able to keep their guns.
Yeah, remember Beto said
we're
coming for your guns. So will local law enforcement be able to arrest federal law enforcement agents if they try to do this?
Well, as far as we're concerned here in Newton County, yes, ma'am. And
they're planning to do that. Did you get the support of the sheriff? I know you went to him and talked to him.
We certainly did. We certainly did. Chris Jennings has been a great sheriff. It's real important to mention, too, we're all very like-minded down here. We're all conservatives, but we all think alike. We love our guns and we love our freedom. That's the biggest thing. It's a freedom. And it's a right to be able to defend yourself against harm, and that's what it is. And the real point to make here is the guns are just a tool. The people that pick them up and choose to use them and how they choose to use them have the choice to use them for good or for bad.
That's
and
right.
We're talking about law-abiding citizens. This isn't dealing with criminals. Law-abiding citizens. Criminals will still choose to do bad every day.
That's right. Commissioner, thank you so much. I wish you all the best. Keep us posted on how this works out for you.
Thank you, Ainsley.
Thank you
very much.
All right, still to come, with Governor Cuomo constantly shifting blame for New York's nursing home crisis, will the victims' families ever see justice? Janice Dean's sister-in-law on why the full investigation is needed to get the truth.
Cuomo continues to play the blame game, refusing to take responsibility for his state's nursing home crisis.
We have had requests from the Department of Justice since last year when President Trump accused Democratic states of the COVID problem. Remember, New York is number 34 in terms of nursing home deaths. And the March 25th memo that Mr. Trump liked to point to, that followed CMS and CDC guidance.
Where the rubber hits the road, because the CDC says no, it didn't. Our next guest lost both of her parents to COVID-19 after they were exposed in New York nursing homes. You know this story. Janice's sister-in-law, Janice Dean's sister-in-law, Donna Johnson, joins us now. So, Donna, these were your parents, and Janice has been leading the charge to get some justice. I think if we could step back, tell me the series of events that took place where you found out that both your parents had passed away.
My dad, I would say just about a year ago now, my dad's facility was in lockdown. He was in a nursing home rehab facility, and my mom was not so far away in an assisted living facility. The plan was that my dad was going to get a little healthier and go and join my mom in the assisted living. My brother received a call on a Sunday afternoon that my dad wasn't feeling well. I don't believe the call led us to believe he was in grave danger. And it was only just a few hours later that he received the next call that my dad had passed away.
So your dad...
we didn't learn.
Yeah, so your dad...
We didn't even...
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Having COVID didn't even cross our minds. And we learned that my dad had COVID when the funeral director received the death certificate. He called and told us my dad had COVID. It was on the death certificate.
So it was just happening. We were just in lockdown. So how did your mother get involved?
My mother was in the assisted living. My mother was there. She had some medical issues, but not like my dad. She had like a bad knee and a bad back. She knew to wash her hands. She knew to not touch anything. She knew to stay away from people. We had her paranoid. We told her everything. She was wiping down the groceries when they came in. She was doing everything you were supposed to do. She started not feeling well. She was telling us she wasn't feeling well maybe a week before she went to the hospital. We contributed to my dad passing away because my brother had to tell her, my dad passed away. They were married for almost 60 years. They were never apart. This crushed them, that just he had to be in one place and she was in the other. That crushed her. But she ended up going to the hospital on a Saturday. They had finally checked her oxygen level and it was very low. And they sent her to the hospital. She was tested at the hospital. And they also gave her that cocktail that they banned.
Yeah.
They put her on that immediately. They tested her and she came back positive. And as she was there, she progressively got worse. She never went on a ventilator, but they kept increasing her oxygen. I have a niece who's a nurse,
right,
and not at the hospital my mom was in, but one of their partner hospitals. And she would send doctors over to check on my mom, and we knew it wasn't good. And quite frankly, we were shocked. Like we were shocked.
Did she get sent back to the nursing home?
She did not. She died in the hospital.
So when you find out both this tragic news, when did you find out that you didn't even see, you never saw them again? And the next time...
I never saw them again. The last words my mom said to me was, "Donna, I'm scared."
Wow, that's...
I'd like to ask Governor Cuomo, how would he feel if he had to live every day with the last words from his mother, "Andrew, I'm scared." You couldn't hug her. You couldn't even talk to her. Her oxygen level was so low, she was having a hard time talking. So the phone calls were very quick. I think I only spoke to her twice when she was in the hospital.
So what's been the tragedy of losing your parents is enough, but what has made it worse for the last year?
What makes it worse? It kind of changes every day because our governor gets on TV and says such ridiculous things. I think the latest thing that has me so sad is when he talks about nursing home patients. He acts like you go to a nursing home and you die, big deal. You don't go to a nursing home and die. It's people's homes. Some of these nursing homes are rehab facilities, and there's people in their 30s and 40s and 50s, all ages in there. You don't go there to die. And how are they feeling watching the news? And all he says is, "Oh, you go to a nursing home, you die."
So he said, one thing he said, Donna.
Every time he says this, I get crazy.
Right. So now we're getting to the point where the families are united. The pressure's there. Former Democratic lawmakers are also playing a role. And now you're at the point where Governor Cuomo is forced to answer this question every day. What question would you like to see answered from him? And what would you like to see happen? Because now they're talking about impeachment hearings.
My first question, I would like to know why he didn't use the tools that President Trump gave him. He asked for the ship. He had the ship. It lay there empty. He had the Javits Center. It lay there empty. He also had, I'm here on Long Island. I know at Stony Brook they were building like makeshift hospitals in the parking lots. I believe in Staten Island they were doing the same. But why didn't you use these facilities? I would just like to know why. What made you sign this mandate to send COVID-infected patients to facilities that were not equipped? I mean, my dad was down the block from me, and I passed it every day during lockdown because I was still dropping the newspaper off to him. But they were wearing garbage bags. What kind of PPE is that?
Right. And he had depleted his whole stockpile. But when you look at what has happened, so from March 25th until May, this whole policy stayed in place. And then they find out 8,000 lost their lives. Now it's 15,000. Even the Democratic Attorney General said, you were not answering these questions. These numbers aren't accurate. And when the Department of Justice inquired, they basically stiff-armed them. Does it seem like there's one set of justice for everybody else, and then there's the Cuomo set of justice?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's amazing that these elected officials that work for us can just get up there and just lie about everything, and there's no penalties. There's no penalties. And then you're attacking another elected official who lost his uncle in it, and you're threatening him and you want to shut him up. What is this? This is not, New York State. It's not, you're not the mafia.
I know. Oh, he's calling a Democratic lawmaker, just screaming at him. Called him multiple times. They stopped picking up. Terrorized his wife, who overheard the whole conversation. But Assemblyman Kim is not giving up. Lastly, what has it been like for you? Janice has been spearheading for the family, and now for families. Has that helped you through the grieving process?
It absolutely has. Janice, I am so certain my parents are so proud of her. My parents weren't the type of people that would want their face to be on TV, and they wouldn't want the attention. But on the other hand to that, my dad always taught us to always stick up for yourself and to stick up for people who can't stick up for themselves. And in that sense, he was talking about the schoolmate in school who was timid and people picked on her or him. But I think now, seeing what Janice is doing, and for all these families, I know how proud I am, and my family is of her. I know how proud my parents are, looking down, smiling on her. We are like forever grateful.
And just think about all those other nursing home people who have not seen their families in a year because of risk of infection. And
well,
now
that too. He threw them a bone on Friday. He finally came in and had one of his briefings on Friday, and he threw a little bone. So here people were thinking all weekend, like, oh, great, we're going to get in, like they're going to change things and we're going to get in. But that's all it was a little bone. It's not that easy still for families to get in. So he's killing seniors daily.
Right.
They're dying of isolation and starvation and quite frankly, in some places, abuse.
It's unbelievable how we don't look at the flip side of lockdown and shutdown. Donna Johnson, it's been a terrible year, but everybody looks at you guys and what your family has rallied together and can really learn from that. And I know your parents got to be proud of you. Donna, thanks so much. Appreciate you telling your story.
Thank you for having me.
Meanwhile, Donna's parents.
No kidding.
All right, yeah, that was shocking over the weekend as news continues to break. Meanwhile, the other big story that's unfolding now, for the longest time was a big deal locally, is now nationally, maybe because Donald Trump is not around to distract from Governor Cuomo in his autocratic ways, but with the growing nursing home scandal, people are really looking into what Governor Cuomo's powers are, and I believe they're going to be taken away as far as his emergency powers sometime this week. But what people are focusing on now is not only did he cover up the number of deaths, which he said his big mistake was not coming down on the lies quicker. But now it turns out that if he went out of his way to lie about numbers and what took place and the decisions that were made, he could be in federal trouble. Here's the quote from the Wall Street Journal today. And this is from
John Dawkins.
Yeah, John Dawkins. This is how it goes. Even if it cannot be proved that the Cuomo administration knowingly provided false information, New York's willful failure to provide information may itself constitute a criminal offense. Remember, they tried to avoid this Department of Justice investigation inquiry, particularly if the intent was to thwart a federal investigation, which, after all, is exactly what Ms. DeRosa reportedly said the administration did on a Zoom call that she never wanted out. And, of course, Dawkins is a former acting U.S. Attorney General for the DOJ Civic Rights Division.
Right, the Civil Rights,
with us a little bit later.
Right, the Civil Rights Division, because they're actually the ones who looked into this back in August, because remember, when Governor Cuomo ordered people back into the nursing homes, suddenly we saw a spike in the number of people who were dying. And yet the governor in public was bragging about how the numbers of nursing home deaths were extremely low in New York. And the DOJ said, wait, that doesn't make any sense. So in August, they asked the Civil Rights Division, asked for data on New York's publicly run nursing homes, which is less than 5% of all of them. And the New York State produced data that underreported because they were talking about semantics, the number of people who died in hospitals versus nursing homes, things like that. The data was incomplete, and they knew it. And then the feds came back in October and said, hey, we need more information. And they stonewalled. And that is against the law because they said, look, we've just got to have these numbers to figure out what's going on. And Ainsley, a Cuomo advisor called it trumped up election eve scam. You're asking for these numbers in October to make us look bad. But as we've heard from Melissa DeRosa, the governor's secretary, just a couple of weeks ago, they knowingly covered it up.
Yeah, and John Dawkins, who wrote that op-ed in the Wall Street Journal, he said it's not just negligence, but possibly criminal. And the reasons are, keep in mind, he served as the U.S. Assistant Attorney General, as Brian said. It's a crime to conceal information and otherwise obstruct government investigations, he says. It's a crime to make false statements to the federal government. He's going to join us along with Janice Dean at 6:50 this morning. This is a huge story all over the country, but in New York, people are wondering, would my loved one still be here today if it weren't for these decisions that Cuomo made months ago? And then when we find out he tried to hide it and cover it up, just makes so many people frustrated and very angry.
Yeah, absolutely. And here's the thing, too, is if you take somebody who tested positive and you put them back into the nursing home, it spreads like wildfire, obviously. And when he was asked about this last week, he said, oh, that's because hospital workers brought it back into nursing homes. There's no stats that back that up. Meanwhile, when asked earlier, Joe Biden clearly is a fan of Governor Cuomo. How do I know? Listen.
I think every state is going to have to be moving in that direction. And it demonstrates that it does bend that curve a little bit. It does increase the prospects that fewer people are going to catch the virus. And the answer is, I don't fully know. We've been leaving it to the governors. Thank God the governors have been moving. Your governor in New York's done one hell of a job. I think he's sort of the gold standard.
The gold standard, that's fantastic because that was April before he became president. I don't know if he feels that same way. Evidently, it did not come up in the White House meeting. But keep in mind, he's not out of the woods yet. There are Democrats coming after him. In fact, Senator Leroy, local Senator Leroy Gavin, have his number right here.
There are a lot of Democrats.
Yeah, well, he came out and he said that more than 60 residents in nursing homes were giving drug cocktails of hydroxychloroquine and zithrotheramine without consent from the patients or crew. So this is a state senator, a Democrat, who wonders what's going on. So Jen Psaki was asked over the weekend, yesterday, what about Joe Biden? Does he still believe that Governor Cuomo is the gold standard?
Does President Biden still believe that Andrew Cuomo is the gold standard, represents the gold standard on leadership during this pandemic? Just a yes or no. Does he
well, John, the president. Well, it doesn't always have to be a yes or no answer, John. I think the president is focused on his goal, his objectives as president of the United States. He's going to continue to work with Governor Cuomo, just like he'll continue to work with governors across the country. And I'm not here to give new labels or names from the president. I'm here to communicate with you about what our focuses are and what his objectives are as president.
Okay, so she dodged that ball. But she made it very clear because he heads up the NGA, the National Governors Association. They would work with him. And she also said, essentially, we're going to leave the investigation to the investigators. So Biden's statement about the gold standard stands until he says, you know what happened there was a big problem. So stay tuned for that. Yeah. Meanwhile, one of the things during the pandemic has been that it's been hard to find things where you can socially distance and you can be outside, and especially important during the winter because it's cold outside. So what can you do outside here in New York City? famously, since the 1980s, you've been able to use a couple of ice rinks. Well, the mayor here announced a couple of days ago that they were pulling the plug on the New York rinks that were operated by Donald Trump's organization because he just wanted to pull the plug. And that caught so many people off guard. It's like, wait a minute. The season's not over, and you're going to close them? We got at least another month of falling down on the ice like that guy right there. Watch this. Here are some of the people who have relied on this ice for leisure time activity outside during the pandemic, and they're steamed at the governor, rather the mayor.
It's really devastating. You know, my kids have been in this program for 6 years, and we're just one of hundreds of families that, you know, we really enjoy this program and stuck with it. You know, this is like Christmas for our kids. This is the one thing that they look forward to every year. And to have it snatched away from us without any explanation, it's really crazy.
It's really upsetting because I was looking forward to the last day of ice hockey because that's when usually me and my friends, like, we get each other's phone numbers, we ice skate, we say our goodbyes. And to have that end early is really sad.
It was sad, and apparently the mayor did not care about the ice skaters and the hockey players and the 250 people who lose their jobs when that goes away. But suddenly, Ainsley, he did a 180 yesterday.
Yeah, thank the good Lord for this. I got an email over the weekend saying your daughter's classes there at the skating rink are going to be canceled when we catch our breath. We're devastated. When we catch our breath, we're going to return your money because you pay in full for the whole season. This was an abrupt closure. They're mad at Donald Trump, so they wanted to cancel this. But it affects you at home, because if you've come to visit New York, chances are you've probably gone ice skating there. And
it's fun.
For all of us here in New York, that's where my daughter learned to ice skate. It is such a fun activity for her with all of her little friends that take this little lesson there. And, you know, it's just a part of this is our backyard.
There's nothing else to do in the winter.
We don't have, we go to the playgrounds at Central Park that are wonderful, and my daughter takes classes there, and I was devastated when I learned of this. Not because, she loves it. She loves it. And it's been such a pleasure for me to watch her when she was so terrified that first lesson to go out there. And Eric Trump, he tweeted out, you know, thank you for keeping Wilmette and Lasker rinks open. You've just made countless New York families, along with 250 employees, incredibly happy. This is a bright moment for New York. Please know we appreciate it and look forward to saying thanks in person.
Right. They bailed out the city in the 1980s when Donald Trump first emerged onto the scene. They came and did something the city could not do, and they got it working, still working. It's a multi-million-dollar contract. They also begged the Trump family to revitalize a golf course just over the Whitestone Bridge, which they did. So now Mayor de Blasio, in a pure show of politics, has decided that that's more important than the 2,500 kids that used it. But the backlash was so loud and so pervasive, he has reversed himself. But the same mindset that had them paint Black Lives Matter in front of Trump Tower in the middle of the pandemic, the same mindset that has you shut down every single school in New York City and keep people from living their lives and shut them down in apartments, that same mindset from the governor and mayor really showed itself and finally hit a stone wall with this latest move, because they were so determined to cut contracts with a successful businessman, and that was President Trump, who used to live here. Every other business has left here, and now you want to oust for pure political purposes the Trump organization. Who's paying their bills?
Right. And remember what Central Park used to be like, guys? Central Park Conservancy came in there and cleaned it all up. Donald Trump did the ice hockey. I mean, a lot of people play hockey there, did the ice skating rink, and changed